What qualifies as domestic violence in Alabama? It's a big question because pretty much anything that can either physically harm you or can place you in reasonable fear that you're going to be physically harmed can be considered an act of domestic violence. Whether it is an assault that physically happens to you, or even other things get termed as domestic violence in a family court or in even municipal court, where, for instance, if you're harassing somebody by text, that can be considered domestic violence harassment. And you wouldn't think of texting somebody repeatedly as domestic violence, but under the code, it could be considered domestic violence third harassment. And so you got to be very careful because domestic violence can be a wide range of things. We commonly think of domestic violence as a physical act of aggression against somebody you've been involved in a relationship with or somebody you're a family member of, because a domestic violence incident is not always just a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend or somebody you've been in a physical relationship with. It can be a grandparent, it can be a child, it can be any of a number of people who you have a family relationship with. And so domestic violence can be a kind of a broad topic, but generally speaking, most of the time, it's going to be an act of physical aggression against somebody you have a family or a personal relationship with from a romantic standpoint. So depending on the county where you live, the process could be a little different about how you actually would file to ask the court to give you what we commonly call a PFA, or an order of protection from abuse. How does it happen? Most counties, you're going to go to the sheriff's office and talk to the investigations, and they'll help you fill out some paperwork. Some of the larger counties have domestic violence advocates there in the district attorney's office who would actually work through the paperwork with you. A good place to start is the sheriff's office, because if it's not the sheriff, they can tell you to go to the district attorney, or they can tell you to go to the circuit clerk's office, because any of the three of those can be a place that someone would start in various counties in Alabama. There's going to be a petition that you're going to fill out that someone will usually be able to help you fill out. That'll get submitted to the judge, and you may even leave the courthouse that same day with an emergency or an ex parte order of protection. So after you file for a protection order, you're going to ultimately have a hearing. Sometimes it happens very quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get a hearing, but you're going to have a hearing at some point. And in that, if you are what's called the plaintiff, if you're the person who files for the protection order, then you're going to have a chance to, through your lawyer and questions you'll be asked, to tell your story, to describe the events, to describe your fears, to describe what the history is that led you to be concerned and why you need a protection order at this point. Because some things may have happened over the course of many years in your relationship and you've never filed, but now a particular event has happened that leads you right now to need a protection order. You're going to get to tell that story. But what if you're not the person who filed? What if you're on the other side of that and someone has filed for a protection order against you? Protection orders are very powerful things, and they have long-lasting consequences, from having to turn in your guns. If you wanted to get a government job, it can affect your security clearance. It can affect all kinds of things in your life. And so if a PFA is filed against you, you have to take it very, very seriously. The effects are long-lasting. The effects are really drastic and severe against you. And so if you are the defendant or the person that the PFA has been filed against, you also need to go with your lawyer and tell your side of the story, because the person on the other side, they may claim you've done all these things that you've never done. They may have no evidence about it, but rather than that, you're able to show the judge that, Judge, this person actually has been harassing me, or this person committed these acts of violence against me. And even if you did strike them, for instance, if it was in retaliation for something they did to you in self-defense, that may be a valid defense to the judge. And so you've got to make sure, whether you're the plaintiff or the defendant, you go to court on your hearing date ready to tell your story plainly and succinctly with specific examples of things that have happened that lead to today you needing an order of protection. So after you get a PFA or a protection order, what legally does that do for you? Most commonly, it's going to keep that person from having any contact with you whatsoever. They can't come to a restaurant where you're eating dinner. They can't come to the ball field where your kids are playing. They can't come to your home. They can't go to your workplace. They can't contact you by phone. They can't send smoke signals. They can't do anything at all to try to be in contact with you, because any contact with you at all is going to be a violation of that protection order. Here's the thing you need to know. If that happens, you need to call the police immediately. If they're violating it, you've got to call the law every time. The first time they violate it, they may get arrested and be able to bond out. The second time they violate the PFA, they're going to have to stay in jail until the next hearing, and that could take a month sometimes or more. The third time they violate that PFA, they're going to have to stay in jail for a year. It's a very serious law. You have to know that you have protections available to you. That's why it's not ever okay to overlook or try to justify abuse that somebody else has committed against you. If you're the victim of domestic violence, you need to take the legal steps to protect yourself and your children, because even if you try to put up with it, if you leave yourself and your children in that situation, you could open yourself up to involvement from DHR, because they may find out domestic violence is going on in your home, and you could actually get criminally charged with the neglect or abuse of your children because you allow domestic violence to happen in the home where you and your children are, and you don't do anything legally to stop it. It's very important you take it seriously. You have legal protections available to you, and you need to take advantage of those to protect yourself and your family. Many times, a protection order will lead to someone filing for a divorce. Certainly, if someone is domestically violent against you and has harmed you or your children, you can't stay in an unsafe situation. And so some people will file for a divorce and then, without telling their lawyer, will go file for a protection order. That's not the right way to do it. You need to make sure your lawyer knows if you're going to file for a PFA so that it can actually be filed in your divorce action, because in some counties, different judges handle protection orders than those who handle divorces. And if you have filed for a protection order and then subsequently filed for a divorce while the protection order is still pending, or before there's a hearing on the protection order, that protection order can get what we call consolidated or brought up into your divorce also. So they can kind of all play together. And so as you look at how a protection order can affect your divorce, if you're the person the PFA has been filed against, if you're the defendant who is alleged to have committed domestic violence, you've got to know in the front end that it's going to automatically set you back in the eyes of everybody, the judge included, until you can have a hearing and hopefully get that PFA gone. Some people choose to have a protection order set aside by agreement and get a mutual restraining order instead, where we're saying, hey, we agree that without admitting anything has happened, we're not going to have any contact with each other except as it results to A, B, or C, maybe the custody of your children or the exchange of some assets or something like that. And so a PFA can have dramatic effects on your divorce. If you are the person who's filed for it and requested a protection order, then you need to know that if you file for a divorce, you need to make sure the judge knows that and that your lawyer knows you filed for that. It may get brought up into your divorce. And then if you have children, you need to make sure that the other spouse, the one who's committed domestic violence, you need to make sure that they're requested to only have supervised visitation with your children. If a person would commit domestic violence against you, they may well commit domestic violence against your children, even their own children. And sadly, that happens too often. You need to make sure you know what's going on so that you can ask for them to have supervised visitation. A PFA can have dramatic effects on the division of assets in a marriage, because if a person is found to have done some kind of wrongdoing, not just other things like adultery or things like that, but even domestic violence in the home, can lead the judge to have a good reason to award the injured spouse a larger share, whether it's alimony, whether it is a division of your home or something like that. Those can be reasons that a divorce can be affected by your protection order. If you're involved in a PFA, whether as a plaintiff, the person who's filed and requested it, or as the defendant who has been filed against, you need a lawyer to appear at this hearing with you. Sometimes the time frames are going to be really short, like 10 days to get a hearing. You need to contact a lawyer as soon as a PFA is either filed by you or served on you, and let a competent, knowledgeable lawyer like our firm attend that hearing with you and represent your best interests.